All right, we are here at Relix's office in Pete Shapiro, our publisher's office, which is actually, I think, the most appropriate place to start our conversation. Pete, who runs Brooklyn Bowl and the Capitol Theater and has known Joe since his Wetlands days with Fat Mama. And all those things kind of factor into what you're doing this Friday at the Capitol Theater, where you're going to present Hooteroll, which was Jerry Garcia's first album outside the Grateful Dead. And I think for a lot of people, it's kind of a little bit of a forgotten album. So I guess, Joe, what kind of made you decide to revisit this?
It was mostly accidental. I had downloaded the record a couple years ago, and I often just when I'm driving around, I just put all my music on shuffle and try to discover, everybody has all this music that they, own, but
Right.
I have records I've never heard, so
Yeah.
I always put stuff on shuffle, and then something grabs my ear, listen to the record, or, remember something that I hadn't listened to. And that album came on, and I'm driving, so I'm not looking down and seeing, what the cover art is, or I had no idea who it was, and it reminded me of my old band, Fat Mama, these guys that I played with in the 90s in Colorado, which was this, instrumental improv, band with similar instrumentation, like organ, Rhodes,
Right.
drums, saxophone, trumpet, etc. So I eventually get to a red light, and I look down, and I'm like, holy shit, this is that record.
Right.
So I take it off shuffle and continue to listen to the whole record through, and I was just sitting there, I was like, man, I would love to, or actually before I even thought about the show, it was just like, kind of this reflection of, this is the music, this sounds like the music I grew up playing, and kind of began making a name for myself way before any of this Grateful Dead connection. And then on the other side of this, now Grateful Dead community I've been lucky to become a part of, it was interesting to have that conduit of connection between all those worlds, which
Right.
was this Garcia, essentially, mostly improvised, 70s funk fusion record,
Yeah.
So it just hit me. I was like, man, I want to do a show where, it's like we pay homage to that record whilst playing, other material of like-minded aesthetic.
Sure.
So it came into my head, and immediately the band came into my head as Jonathan Goldberger, Eric Deutsch, Dave Harrington, Stuart Bogey, Kevin Kendrick, and Jordan McLean. It was just like, oh yeah, that guy, that should be the guy, and it just kind of clicked, and it made me very excited to explore that type of music again, that I don't get to do as much as I used to. I'll do these small little things at Threes Brewing that
Right.
I've seen you at, and improv duos with either Harrington or Goldberger, stuff like that, real free, full improv stuff. So I was excited to do something with a little bit more of a infrastructure and a concept. So yeah, basically we're gonna, it's gonna be variations on themes. We're not gonna play the Hooteroll record as the Hooteroll record. We're gonna take themes and explore them and let them go off into the stratosphere, and and same with other songs. We're gonna do a Keith Jarrett number. We're gonna do a Carla Bley song. We're gonna do some Gary Burton, because we have Kevin Kendrick playing vibraphone, and he's absolutely incredible, which isn't on the Hooteroll record.
Right.
Some of these
Yeah.
instruments aren't on that, so we're not trying to replicate that. We're just using that as inspiration. And I think we might do one of my tunes, and just kind of see what happens. We're gonna do a Miles thing, and it's open concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the basis of this band is Fat Mama, which, of course, comes from a Herbie Hancock song, and kind of has that roots in that kind of jazz fusion stuff that you played so much in the late 90s when you first moved to New York and whatnot. But I guess as you were kind of, listening to this album and learning it and kind of thinking these variations, what did that teach you about kind of Garcia's playing and Howard's playing, and kind of how that fits into this Dead catalog that you've been playing so much in the last few years?
Yeah, I guess it was just a reminder that everybody has so much more stuff than they show, to everyone. I would have never thought it was Garcia playing on that record, and it was exciting to think about this man who I've become so enamored with through, his music, picturing him in this scenario where he was just totally, coming from the same place.
Right.
Of people like Herbie and John McLaughlin and these places that I was more familiar with
Yeah.
for most of the course of my career than I was the Grateful Dead catalog. So it was just exciting to remember that just because you think you know what somebody's all about, there's always more cool stuff under the surface.
No, it's interesting. So, for those guys tuning in online, Joe just recently did an interview for Relix.com and JamBands.com where he was talking a little bit about, Joe Russo's Almost Dead celebrating his 100th show a few weeks ago. Congratulations on
Thanks.
that. And, one thing that really struck me is when you said that when you first kind of decided to jump into this Dead catalog, the stuff that really struck you was some of the early, more like almost punk rock stuff,
Yeah.
the 60s and early 70s stuff. And since then, you've obviously explored the entire range of their material. But speaking of that early, or I guess that mid-60s to late 60s material, the jump from that punk material to the jazz fusion stuff feels really extreme when you listen to it right back to back, but it really does say something about kind of maybe the freedom of Jerry Garcia's playing at that point and stuff. And what if you could speak to that a little
I think it's the same intention,
Yeah.
It's the complete, like, I don't give a fuck feeling that I get from listening to him playing on, like, the first Grateful Dead record and on the Hooteroll record. Not necessarily, like, in that aggressive way, but you just hear it's just so raw.
Yeah.
And like, not contrived at all. It's completely in the moment, and it's improvised, and you feel, a youthful angst about it, and that, I think, like I was saying in our other interview, that absolutely speaks to me. That's where I've always come from. I always liked a little bit more of a harder edge, and I liked, a grittier version of everything. So when we did decide to do that one J-Rad show, that was most of the basis of where I wanted to cover was like that kind of stuff, having been in Further for a long time, which was amazing, certainly had a different aesthetic than the first J-Rad show, so I was excited to like kind of get a little raw and tough on it, and obviously playing with the guys that I was playing with and now continue to play with, it was just like a perfect thing. Like, we weren't going to go out there and try to sound like, anything other than what it sounded like, which was an aesthetic that I think does speak to us in general. Like, when you go back and listen to, like, duo stuff or, old Rana stuff or, obviously Dave with Ween, and, it's like most of our backgrounds are a little bit more aggressive than not.
Yeah.
It's like, in my younger years, obviously with a little bit more energy, I would go a little nuts.
Right.
But I still feel that way, and I still am excited by that emotional approach. It doesn't mean it has to be loud or crazy, but I like that raw feeling of like no edges need to be that smooth, and things can explode at any second, and you feel like you're on that that train track, about to meet disaster, and I think that's where we still try to come from, even though we did, as we decided to do more and more, obviously we couldn't just sit on, 3 years of that material, and we had to explore more, which has been amazing, and I think we still try to go into it with that attitude, while serving the songs. It's still, I think, the ability to attack things in that way is always there.
Right, and kind of what you're speaking to is the fact that you guys have a really, the Russo's Almost Dead group has really great musical shorthand. You guys were kind of a house band, not only for just the wetlands at that time, but kind of the whole downtown improvisational alternative rock community for many years. From the early aughts to really when you solidified as J-Rad 15 years later. Yeah. And a lot of the people you're playing with Friday also have a very long history with you and with each other. And I guess speaking of some people you mentioned, Jordan and Stewart, who are obviously two of the longtime members of the Octaballis Horns. They're people who come from the Afrobeat community as well as the jazz world. I mean, how did you guys first connect? And I mean, I know you and Stewart have played together, kind of, as I like to say, at opposite sides of the horseshoe. Last night you were together on Late Night TV with Craig Finn, and this Friday you're going to be doing some crazy avant-garde jazz together.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, I think, for all of us. And, people find themselves in friend crews and musical crews, and it's, I think it's a shared belief system and concept, and I know for me and the people I'm lucky enough to play with, nobody wants to be pigeonholed into one thing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than being able to use your instrument to speak different languages. I had an absolute blast playing with Craig last night and Will tonight, and it couldn't be further away from how I'll be playing on Friday, or how I think a lot of people know me, how I play in JRAD. That's the goal, you know. You got to express yourself in every way possible. So, you know, thinking about someone like Stewart or Eric Deutsch, or, you know, any of these guys, everybody's so able to speak in so many different ways that, you know, why not explore it? It would be a shame to just try to do one thing. And I think the Almost Dead thing is really cool, much like the Further thing was, and my understanding of what the Grateful Dead means to me is there is an opportunity to speak a lot of languages in one place.
Yeah.
And it's accepted, and it's encouraged, and it's exciting. But on the other side, it's really fun to be playing with Craig and make records with him or with Cass or like people like that, where, you know, it would not be appropriate for me to spaz out and change tempos and, like, you know, scream into a microphone or whatever. It's nice to paint within the lines sometimes, and usually, you know, as gratifying or more gratifying than having, you know, free reign of, you know, whatever you want to do. You know, with Almost Dead, it's literally, it's like, I feel like doing this.
Yeah.
And for everybody in the band, and that's an amazing thing to be able to feel while playing music that anyone wants to come see. You know, it's the most amazing gift in the world, is to be able to feel like you have absolute free expression in every moment and have people care to see that. But it's really, really gratifying to stick the landing too when you're playing other music, and, like, you know, I was nervous as hell before the cameras turned on last night.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you know, I'm not on TV all the time, and I'm playing these parts, and, you know, this beautiful record we made, and you try to stay true to that, and it's a lot harder to do that, honestly, than to go out and do whatever the hell you want, because you literally can't do anything wrong on the JRAD stage. But, you know, if I dropped a stick or missed a beat or something, it's like the song was going to get really weird. So it's exciting to have both.
Well, I know, I'd like that you mentioned both Craig and Cass. You know, that's Cass McCombs, obviously, who has been in this office and is a kind of great singer-songwriter who's now in California, but kind of drifts back and forth between here and New York, or New York and California. You know, because both of those guys do have roots in kind of the Dead community and the improvisational world, and they almost treat that material, it's like a Fabergé egg. It's like they understand kind of the delicacies of it and the expansion possibilities, but they want to kind of keep it a little bit more confined, at least in their own songs, so that they both have stretched out in various occasions when they're playing for the guys from the Dead or on their own and stuff, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be hard-pressed to find anyone from any, you know, genre or scene that I get to play with that doesn't have some sort of connection to the Grateful Dead. That's something that I really learned, like when Further was going and I met like the Devendorfs at Radio City Music Hall. You know, I was a National fan, and somebody's like, "Hey, you know, the guys from the National here." I'm like, "What do you mean? That's amazing." You know, and like I would start meeting, you know, these people and starting to realize that everybody has some sort of physical or emotional connection to this music, and every person you meet and every layer you pull back from that is more and more exciting. It's more and more encouraging, it's when people like Cass and Craig present themselves as like huge Grateful Dead fans. It's exciting because they're not screaming it in their look, in their personal compositions at all, and you just see how the influence of that band on so many things, whether people know it or not.
Now, it's been a while since we've had an original Joe Russo composition. We got one a couple weeks ago with Joe Russo's Almost Dead, and you mentioned that you might play one of your own songs this Friday. Is there, you know, where does that song come from? Is that something you've been working on?
The one for Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I have a new studio with my buddy Sam Cohen, who's an incredible musician and an amazing producer, and we were lucky enough to find this space, and now that I'm poking my head out from complete fatherhood every day, I've been going back to the studio and writing and recording a ton, and I think this song that we might play, I just, you know, you just sit down and start going for it. I think my buddy Dan Aid was supposed to come over who's an amazing guitarist and pedal steel player, and I met him through
Right.
the cast band with John Shaw. And we were going to come over and do some recording, and he ended up not being able to make it. And I started writing the song, and it's called Song for Buddy, and it's kind of like this Frizzelian meets Radiohead instrumental thing in 9/8 time, because I like odd times too much. So, like that. And every day it could be something different. I could write a pop tune, or I could write whatever, or a pop feeling tune. And that tune just kind of felt like if I was going to pull any of my stuff in, it was a fairly simple song in that there's not that much going on. It just felt like it would be a nice breath in this show, and the guys that I'm playing with have had such an influence on me growing up, and really helped form quite a bit of my personal aesthetic in writing and playing. So it felt like, all right, well, I'm doing this thing where I'm going back and touching on this strange aspect of Jerry Garcia that inspired me to think about this other music in my life, that made me think about music I'm still writing now that has nothing to do with the Grateful Dead, that is more of a throwback to that instrumental, whatever kind of stuff. And it's just like, maybe that's another little piece. It feels like it's some sort of like emotional review for me or something.
I like that. That could be the album title, the emotional review. Yeah.
Emotional review totally.
Well, one more question, then we'll get some questions from the internet. But when Fat Mama was first coalescing in Colorado, you guys were part of the jam band scene, but decidedly focused on kind of more the jazz and fusion aspects of it. When you and Eric and Jonathan and Kevin were first in the horn section first met, was the Grateful Dead ever something that was discussed or played in the group, or was that something that kind of you all rediscovered later through various channels?
No, honestly, I think most of the guys in the band loved the Dead, and as people know, at that time, I was not as receptive.
Sure, yeah.
Eric went to Dead shows, he had a sweet ponytail. No, that really, I don't think, maybe if I went back and studied every one of the compositions, maybe you could find a thing, but I don't think there was an overt influence in that music. That music was really, especially when we really found our thing, was, I think, more inspired by, like John Zorn and like that electric Miles 70s stuff and more stuff like that. But again, when you look back at like 78 Mile stuff, it's like, oh, Garcia was obviously checking that out too, because Hooteroll, so, I guess there is a shared influence or something, so maybe it wasn't a direct line from the Grateful Dead to Eric or Jonathan to one of their songs for our weird band with a terrible name. But, we all have our influences that come through in every way, whether it's noticed or not. Anybody that grows up, it's like anything I've ever listened to or loved is in some way going to come out every time I play, just like anybody else. So, I guess there's a dash of Jerry there.
Absolutely. It's funny, I just saw the new Jerry Garcia, the Grateful Dead movie that's coming out.
Oh, man,
produced. And one thing that kind of just shows how all these family trees kind of come back together is, very early in the movie when they're still the Warlocks, and Phil finds out that, of course, there's another band called the Warlocks, right. He gets their name, and that band becomes the Velvet Underground. And then the two trees kind of merge back to, that Radio City show where you and the Devendorfs were hanging out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's all just a weird world.
Well, do we have some questions from Facebook fans here?
Matt pulled a couple.
Okay.
One of them is, describe the Hooteroll show in one word.
Ooh. This could be a boring answer, but I guess improvisation. Expression, I guess, would be another one, or reflection for me. That's 3 words, so I apologize.
We get some end dashes there to make it all work.
Yeah, totally. slash.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, Michael Vincent says, hey Joe, caught your show with Ola back at New Blue about a year or so ago. Still listen to that tape. Any plans to do anything with that lineup again?
Yes. And we have a show, and I'll have to look on my phone and find out what it is and where it is. I think we're doing another New Blue show coming up. I'll post something online after this, but yes, there is going to be another show, and we're going to try to do a little bit more regular stuff, hopefully this summer, and we throw around emails a lot and try to, you know, with any of these bands that aren't bands, that are comprised of just working musicians, it's often very difficult to get everybody in the same room, and I would say 1,000 times as much for JRAD. Like, so it's always a scramble to try to get it, but yeah, for sure, we're going to do some more stuff with that.
And before you get to the next question, you know, the New Blue has become one of your living rooms over the last year, along with like Threes Brewing, where you try out these different configurations. You know, who are some of the people you played with at New Blue that, you know, both for like the Matt's question and also kind of the extended family you've become part of there?
Yeah, well, you know, Harrington, I think, became a way bigger part of my life through that. We did some really cool stuff there. We did a really fun show with just myself and Dave and Sam Cohen, you know, fully improvised. Most of the shows, actually all of the shows at both of those venues, unless it was like with Cass or with like Matt Trowbridge or something like that, are completely improvised. There's no concept, there's no talking it out. The stuff with Ola, we do a lot of Avi Bortnick's songs and some like choice covers, so that has a little bit more of a framework. But you know, so the Ola band is Avi and Scott Metzger and Andy Hess and myself, and that's a little bit more of a, you know, kind of funky, groovy situation.
Yeah.
Which is great. You know, I feel so lucky to be able to go back and touch upon a lot more of this music that I used to play way more, and I feel like I have more time now to do everything that I want, and I feel really lucky to be able to do that. So like with those guys, you know, that's that, and then I started a little series, God, I don't know how long ago it was now, at Threes, and I was calling it the Icy Bridge like sessions or something like that, and that concept was me and some ridiculous electronic / whatever multi-instrument setup and one other improviser, and with that did one with Harrington, which was incredible. Did a couple with Jonathan Goldberger, that was equally as incredible, and Stuart Bogey, Metzger, you know, and just really just laying yourself out there to the moment. So I'm really fortunate to have places like Threes, especially, you know, that living right down the street from it is it's pretty incredible for them just to be like, yeah, sure, come do your weird thing, and you know, like 13 people will come and it'll be sweet, and you know, and then the New Blue thing was strangely a club I didn't play a lot in the early 2000s, and have probably played it more in the last 2 years than I ever had. So it's fun, and they have the new venue that maybe, I think that's where we're going to do the Ola
The 151 venue?
Yeah. So yeah, and again, I'll put that up on some sort of social.
Do you have one more?
Yes. Taylor Gabriel says, "Hey Joe, name one musician you would love to have play with JRAD who hasn't yet."
Interesting. Man, this is going to sound like a little bit weird question or answer, but I don't think there is one. I think my favorite thing about JRAD is getting to play with my buddies, and you know, just have fun. So I think when you bring other people into the fold, it changes the dynamic of what I think we strive for. We've been very lucky for the people that have come in to have it really be amazing. You know, O'Teal, John Shaw, and Stewart, and Cole Atkins, and Alicia Shakur, and all the anti-loss horns that have played with us. I don't know if I'm lusting after someone to really join us. I guess if I had to say someone, I think it would be fun to play with Trey. After we did the rehearsal stuff with him when he was rehearsing for fairly well, myself and Scott and Dave and Trey's piano player from the Broadway stuff, you know, did this like jam session to help him kind of get the juices flowing. And I mean, that day was amazing, and it'll never be heard by anyone. It was in a room smaller than this and a whole lot sweatier. So I think he would be really fun. And I'm sure there are people, but I can't maybe think of anybody right now that I'm dying to to bring in other than to play with like my best pals. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's the thing about it is we get to do this thing with old friends. You know?
Well, I guess, we'll let you get going to the City Winery where you're playing tonight with Craig Finn and some of your best pals, but maybe to kind of help answer Taylor's question a little bit.
Yeah.
You have played with some new people recently, and I think it was out west who did these Alone and Together shows.
Yeah.
A lot of kind of people who hadn't really been part of your world until recently, but now feel very much in line with your Venn diagram here.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about both those shows, and some people have kind of come through there and that whole concept. And
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
how that applies to J-Rad. And
those shows were incredible. So our friend Raimi Egan had this concept for Alone and Together, which was to bring together songwriters to do a little tour or a concert where each member covers someone else in
Yeah.
the ensemble. So this lineup was Eric Johnson from Fruit Bats, Sam Cohen, Kevin Morby, and then myself and Josh Kaufman as a rhythm section. And I'd been very familiar with Sam's work. I had been a Fruit Bats fan. I had just gotten hip to Kevin's stuff.
Right, it was amazing.
I mean, all of them are just so amazing. So we went out and did this tour on the West Coast, did a couple of rehearsals, and then played like 4 shows. And it was incredible, getting to play, again, like I was saying, like getting to play a different way. Most of those shows were whisper quiet.
Yeah.
And beautiful and really emotional, and anytime you get a chance to play with someone like any of those guys, it informs your next move always. Like I learn stuff constantly by being able to be in those situations, and it helps you kind of like tweak your understanding of music in general. Yeah, actually, someone who I would love to like sing with J-Rad would be Eric from Fruit Bats.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating dude. I think he's awesome, and he's a big Dead fan. We actually did Stella Blue. That was like one random cover we did, which wasn't like, it's not a Dead project.
Yeah.
Not at all. So, and that speaks to kind of what we started on too, where it's like the shared love of that band and its material transcends one scene, and it feels like it's really, really, like I said, everywhere. As far as influence goes, no matter what people play in their own bands. And yeah, I mean, it was just like, I was welling up as this guy's singing this.
Yeah.
And I would love to see him sing something like this. And then actually now, Sharon Van Etten, I would love to have Sharon come up. I think it's, the thing I get really excited about with J-Rad is vocalists to come in, and to really just do their thing, so retracting my earlier statement a little bit, not as much instrumentalists, but vocalists are always welcome, because I think that's been pretty much my favorite thing, is to like, have that aspect, pop in and out, and to have these just gifted singers, get to share their sound on that is really exciting. So those two would certainly be some pretty cool additions.
Awesome. We'll see Joe this Friday at the Capitol Theater.
You get one more question in?
One more question?
I thought this would be a good one to end on.
Yeah.
Maria wants to know, if you could play one song with Jerry Garcia, what would it be?
Ooh.
Holy!
I'll open that to 2 or 3 songs.
The encore question might be the best question of the night.
I know. I think China Doll. I absolutely love that song. It might be my favorite song. And, the Garcia ballad stuff, it just, it nails me, So I think I actually feel pretty comfortable with that answer.
Yeah.
To hear him sing and perform that, and to be somehow a part of that, would be, I think, my 100% answer.
All right.
That's
Sounds
pretty
great.
strong.
That's pretty
I
strong.
feel pretty good about
Yeah.
that.
I think sometimes your initial response is like, that's
Yeah,
the truth
it
right
was
there.
just
As
like, what, that's
you're
it.
speaking of truth. That's the truth
I'm
right there.
speaking
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joe will be at City Winery tonight with Craig Finn, and we'll see him Friday at the Cap.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, guys.